Welcome to the Millionaire Journey Podcast. The goal of this podcast is to guide and empower you on your journey towards financial independence. Here's your host, Glenn Yaney.
Today, my guest is Damion Lupo, founder of eQRP and FrameTec. Welcome, Damion.
Hey, Glenn, it's good to see you, man. Really enjoying this riff offline and looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, great. And I found Damion through, I actually participated in his eQRP program, and we'll go into that more. But if you could, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm an entrepreneur. I think I came out of the womb looking for problems to solve in the world and started doing that when I was 11. The problem then was my parents told me we were broke, and it pissed me off because I was told, no, we can't go buy video games. So it like triggered my brain to go find a solution, which means I started a video game business. And as an entrepreneur, I couldn't help myself. I got thrown out of college about 8 years later because I started a bookstore on campus that put the other bookstore out of business. It was good for all the students, but it pissed off the administration. So they tossed my ass out. And I was like, wait a second, maybe this is not the path. Entrepreneurs, it's kind of like Elon. He goes and breaks things to build things. And that's just what we do. And so 70 plus businesses later, it's a function of seeing a problem, trying to solve the problem, do it better, faster, or first compared to others. And it leads down a path where you really can't get off it if you're an entrepreneur. And it's the same if you're not an entrepreneur. I used to think everybody should be an entrepreneur. Everybody should start a business. What I realized is that's not a great idea for some people are just not wired. Like it is going to make them freak out and melt down.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think it's Patrick Bet-David, but I think I'm more of what they call like a second man. And I like to have somebody in charge, kind of, but at the same time, like I feel like the pressure of somebody else telling me that there's but I work harder that way. And that's kind of like my personality is what I would say.
I'm glad you brought that up because in recent times, I've been dealing with some of that where I've got people that are trying to figure out their role. And there is a very powerful role for the second man, the second woman, the person, the right hand, somebody incredibly capable. What happens, I've noticed with people will say, well, I need to be in charge because it's like their ego is making that decision instead of their rationality. It's, you can get a lot more done and be a lot more productive and ultimately have a bigger impact if you acknowledge your role and what you should be doing instead of what you want to do or your arrogance is leading towards. That just ends up creating a lot of friction. And because ultimately, in any organization, if it's run by committee, you have a Politburo, which is like the Soviet Union. You have a bunch of people and everything's a committee. That doesn't work. You have to have somebody that's going to drive things. And you have to ask yourself, is that my role or is that somebody else's role? It's not two people's roles. That's a very bad idea. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's that's the most important role I have. My right hand, somebody that I can rely on, that's smart and savvy and aggressive. That's the most important person to have in my organization.
I totally agree with what that because, right now in my personal development stage is that we have 650 units and my mind tells me we need, 1,200 units, and in reality, it's like, I kind of look at it as like, okay, if I can't make money with 650 units, then why would I even go any further? It's like, the stress of, buying a lot of value add properties and stuff like that ends up being, it makes it a harder struggle. So I'm thinking, how about I just build the foundation to be able to make the next 600 units that much easier to get to, it's just make me more lendable, all the stuff that comes with it. But if I'm like running on red line and just continuously buying more properties, those new properties won't run as well as, they'll run just as well as the other 650 because I haven't been able to stabilize them as quickly, so that's a big part for me.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people, and I'm not gonna poke too hard here, but there's a lot of people that have a philosophy that more is better sooner than later. And it's more isn't better, more is more. And I used to think more is better. So I bought houses and I ended up with 150 houses, which are effectively 150 individual units. It's like having 150 McDonald's, but they're not McDonald's. They're like mom and pop pizza joints that are all run differently. And so you have absolute chaos. I mean, these were in 7 different states. It was wild. And to your point, if you don't develop the foundation, what people are missing is they go, I need to hyper jump from a house to hundreds or thousands of units. The problem is they aren't the person that is a 10,000 unit person. And you've got to build yourself so your thermostat, your level of wealth is aligned with where you are. And people go too fast and they go, oh, well, it's not working. More will fix it. No, more is going to create potentially more fees for you. And then you're going to have a pile of dog crap that you're still dealing with. It's just going to be 3 times the size or 10 times the size. I'm all in favor of going 10x to think and stretch yourself. But you got to have a dose of pragmatism and reality and some pessimistic thinking, like in the book Thinking for a Change. There's these different types of thinking. And what people have been conned into, and not just convinced, but conned into, is thinking that, oh, if I have more, it'll solve. That's like saying my wife is pissing me off. I'm going to have a second wife. That'll solve the problem. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But that's how people look at real estate. More will fix my problem. No, more will amplify your problem. And make no mistake, you need to fix what you got, get the foundation right. And you go, oh man, I don't want to wait that long. great. So you're just going to accelerate your own demise. I've done
Yeah.
that. I know what it's like. So I can tell you from
100%.
experience, it's not the right path.
Yeah. And I also, it's like you could 10x your unit count or 10x your profit. What do you want to do? So it's like, that's the answer is like, well, maybe if you like, so I'll just tell you, I just to be open book, we have about $100,000 of vacancy right now. So it's monthly rent that we could be collecting. And my business partner is like, okay, so, and he's kind of the money guy as well. He's like, so what would it take to get to, how much would it cost to buy say we cut that number in half and we just say $50,000, what would it take to buy that $50,000 a month revenue property? I'd say it'd be about $4 or $5 million. And we'd have to do all the work, do all the stuff. He's like, what if you didn't have to spend any money and create $4 or $5 million of equity, and that was his thing. And I'm like, okay, you're right. We're just going to focus on this, so.
It's smart. There's usually a lot, but what people do is they're looking for the big sizzle, the big hit, the big dopamine driver. And so buying a property, it's kind of like shopping for bags or shoes for a lot of women. Oh, I got to buy another one. Now, your other one was awesome. Maybe you just need to put a piece of duct tape on it and it'll work. The funny part is people tend to go, they get impatient. They're I call them drunk squirrels chasing shiny nuts. And it's what people do. They can't help it. Like, oh, I got to go to the next thing. But what about the nut that you're holding? And you're literally like, oh, well, if I actually nurtured this nut, I could turn it into an oak tree. But now I'm going to go chase another nut.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about, eQRP, or like, what is eQRP?
eQRP is a system that I developed a decade ago to give people control of retirement money in a different way. And it's partly a tool and it's partly a community. So what I've built is this tool that gives you your IRAs and 401ks in your hand. Like you have all your money, you can go do what you want, invest in real estate, Bitcoin, all these different things outside of just Wall Street. And it brought together thousands of people in a community that are now working together, creating deals together, growing together. What most people start out doing is they start doing something different than what they were doing in investing or business, and they feel very isolated. Generally, they're not surrounded by all sorts of entrepreneurs. They might have one here or there, but they're typically surrounded by legacy thinking in their families. And so this is a way to bring people together. And we end up doing more, going further, going faster, and being happier when we have an incredible community that's aligned with our thinking and our philosophy, as opposed to being in a box full of crabs that are constantly pulling us down. That's what eQRP is. It's about freedom and it's about bringing people together.
I love that one line you said about legacy thinking. And I think that how often do I revert to that thing? And it's like, you have to like find the person where you want to be to get to where you want to go type thing, compared to following the person that hasn't been there, type to give you advice on how to get there,
That's actually what we see a lot with influencers and coaches.
Yeah.
We see people that are speaking something that they haven't done. And there are some world-class therapists and coaches that, like, was Nick Saban the world's best football player? I don't even know his background and if he played football, but you could argue he's the best coach in college football ever. And so sometimes coaching is incredibly powerful, but what most people are doing, especially in investing and money, is they're getting advice from people that haven't done it. And that's like, this book is really good. Well, that book was just a reprocessed, recut up a bunch of other stuff from Think and Grow Rich and the Bible and all these other things. And that author, you think, oh, this person's really super smart. You know what? What's their balance sheet say? I know what my balance sheet says. It says I'm not full of shit. And it's because I've actually done things. I've built businesses. I didn't inherit to be fair, I inherited $7,000. That was the one inheritance I got from my grandmother. So, it's like people bash on Trump. Oh, he just inherited. No, he inherited some money, 10 million. I don't know what it was, but the guy's worth billions. So if you can convert 10 million to billions, I would say, you know what the hell you're doing. And it's the same thing when you're looking at advice. I think Graham Stephan, as an example, has a lot of great content.
Yeah.
But when he's talking about investing, and he's got a lot of great people, but I look at somebody like that has millions of views, and he's making millions a year in ad revenue, and he's teaching people about money. The dude has made all his money off of influencing, and then he pours it into real estate, and then he makes more money, and then thinks he can teach you about real estate. No, he should be honest and say, if you want to do real estate, here's my path. You make a bunch of money as an influencer from YouTube, and then you pour it into real estate. It's disingenuous to not to teach something because it's very sizzly, and people are like, oh, they want hope. But there's a lot of damn work, and modeling is incredibly useful. I did that 25 years ago with guys that were doing houses. I'm like, what did you do? And then I just did what they did over and over again. And that was different than somebody giving me a theory that wouldn't work. And that's what most people are doing. They're giving theories and they're not being honest about the whole picture, like the good, the bad, the ugly, mostly because they don't have any experience.
Definitely. So so you're saying that eQRP, because what I always thought eQRP is more of like almost like a self-directed 401k, but you're saying it's like more of a social group as well, like a mastermind group.
Yeah, so the eQRP is a system. So it's what happens. It's funny because the internet's funny. You get people and bots and everything trying to confuse. Like apparently Elon's according to MSNBC, he's a Nazi. I was listening to him talk to Joe Rogan. He's like, what are you talking about? But that's all people have. And so like when we look in the space of IRAs and 401ks, there is chatter that, oh, eQRP is X, and people just assume it because they've heard it. Part of the eQRP system is a tool that's a self-directed 401k. Part of it is a community. I would argue the community is more important than the tool, because you can get a bunch of documents from anybody. What you can't get is the community of thousands of people that have invested thousands of dollars and are really serious. And that's what you really can't create out of thin air. Any knucklehead can go create a bunch of documents and say, look, I got a self-directed 401k and it's free. That's what most people are doing. And so how do you compete with community? You basically try to make that community a commodity. And that's what we've heard out there in the wild is we see people that are, they don't have anything good to offer. So they just try to make everything else bad or the same and then say cheaper is better. There's a misunderstanding that a race to the bottom is a good business model. And it's a terrible business model. That what businesses should be doing, real estate or others, is finding more value and creating more for people and delivering more than you're charging, and keep finding more value to deliver. And what most people do is they're like, okay, well, let's figure out how we're cheaper. And it's like, then you're going to end up, because everything's going to zero. It's ephemeralization, doing more with less. And ultimately it's getting to zero. It's like how we digitize things. Peter Diamandis talks about it, getting everything to zero, digitizing. I mean, basically everything is getting to free. And so eQRP is something that's special because the people aren't free. There's a lot of energy there. And that's what I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. So if you could, the one thing I know that kind of led me to eQRP was the difference between a self-directed IRA compared to a 401k. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So most people kind of default into an IRA oftentimes when they leave a job and they have a 401k or a 403b or 457 or something, and they go, oh, I can self-direct, I can control it. Normally what happens is people take their money and they move it into a self-directed IRA, and they can pick whatever stocks they want. That's not really a self-directed IRA. That's a pick a few things IRA, and you get to choose, but you're really stuck in paper assets. So the difference between a self-directed IRA usually is that people have limited access to all their alternatives. With a self-directed 401k, specifically the eQRP, you have that retirement money, it's a tax shelter, and you get to invest in anything you want: real estate, Bitcoin, gold, startups. And with IRAs, custodians limit what you can do. So Charles Schwab limits you and says you can only do stocks or mutual funds, whereas some other one might say, yeah, you can do real estate. It gives you options. eQRP gives you all the options. Everybody else gives you limited options. And one of the biggest ones for people in real estate, people say, I want to use my retirement money for an apartment or a house or Airbnb. Well, if you do that with an IRA and there's any type of debt, which we typically have debt with real estate, then there's something called UBIT tax, which can be a 37% tax on top of your other taxes, just because you used an IRA for real estate. And with a eQRP, you're exempt. There's no tax. And I mean, it's the same exact investment, but because you can move things from IRAs to eQRP, and people do. They'll move cash. They'll have a house that their IRA bought, has some debt, has a mortgage, and we will move the house into an eQRP, and all of a sudden they no longer have UBIT tax exposure. So we can solve the problem. That's one of the biggest ones, and ultimately that control where you have the checkbook. It's illegal for somebody to have a checkbook with an IRA the way that they've been doing it for years, because the court said people were manipulating it, and we're not allowed to do that anymore.
So I'll tell you that for me, whenever I started the eQRP process, it was the beginning of my financial independence. Like literally, I started your program. I think I rolled over, I think it was 80,000 from an IRA over to a self-directed 401k, and it was 2020, and the CARES Act happened, and I feel I was very fortunate. I ended up draining the bank account and just putting it over. I was like, I'll pay the 10% tax, and then I'll have the cash flow today. And I think that the eQRP is for a certain type of investor, maybe, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I would say it's more of for limited partner, but also somebody with the higher net worth. I mean, because when you're just getting started, I think that the cash flow is so important to come into your system to be able to get you out of the rat race type thing. And then once you're out of that, it's like, then you can start protecting yourself from taxes, because you're really not paying that many taxes when you're making $100,000 compared to you're getting into the $300,000 to $500,000 a year income. Then it turns into, okay, maybe you should start shielding your taxes a little bit, Hey guys, if you want to learn more about our deals we're investing in, go to our website and sign up for our free ebook, 10 Reasons Mobile Home Parks Outperform Other Real Estate Investments. We won't spam you. We'll just keep you updated on the podcast and the deals we're working on. Now, back to the show.
So I think you have a really good point about this is not for everybody. And there's two things that I think that you brought up that are worth talking about a little bit. One, there's a difference between being an active, building assets, and being passive, where you're putting your money into something and you're not. The eQRP is meant for money that's going to be passively invested, it's not for you to have an active business with. So
Yeah.
what I always say to people is this is a great part of your life because you can create a tax-free pile. And the way you do that is with the Roth eQRP, where this money grows tax-free and then you get to spend it tax-free. And not even real estate gets you there. Because with real estate, you have to constantly stay in real estate. The moment you exit real estate, because you actually want to spend all your money, if that's the case, there is a tax event. So I like eQRP as part of people's portfolio, especially the Roth and primarily the Roth, because it gives you that power. And here's the thing that we've noticed. Most of the people that are eQRP members, they come in with $100,000. So similar to what you did.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're using this tool to grow, to not just grow their money, but growing themselves. And when you're starting off, I totally love the idea of cash flow, but people, from my perspective, they chase cash flow too soon and they don't have enough capital to build the cash flow passively. And my contention is if you pour energy into something and it forces your capital to grow, whether it's building a business or building a house or doing something, then you're more likely to get to a place where you've built capital and then you convert it into cash flow. I did the whole thing. I had no money. 25 years ago, I started buying houses on credit cards. I had no capital. And it was a really hard thing to do. I made $200 a month. Yay. Okay. Now I've got 10 houses and I make $2,000 a month until a roof gets damaged. And then I have no capital and I have a $4,000 problem. So there's a really big value around creating capital. It's harder to create large amounts of capital than it is to create $200 a month in cash flow. And it's also sounding very sexy. Mailbox money, make everybody happy. But the reality is, I believe that there's two phases. It's capital growth and then cash flow. You can kind of do some of them together, but the biggest problem is people go in trying to create cash flow and they have no capital and it puts way too much stress in the system and you're willing to do things and then you get caught and you have nothing to backstop. And so I think that's my perspective. People should be primarily building capital while they're growing themselves and then can start converting that into cash flow along the way versus going right into cash flow and saying, I got $5,000 a month in passive. I got no money in the bank and I'm free. No, you're not. Wait until the roof blows off. Wait until one thing happens. And you're like, oh crap. So that's what I've seen over the years in my experience.
Yeah. So what I think you're saying, and maybe I think we're aligned with, it's almost like, and I look back on my own story, is the financial, I guess the average, I guess the information that's given is that you take a lot of risk when you're young to de-risk when you're older. And I actually think it's the opposite. It's kind of what you were saying, similar to. It's like you put you might have to go into a more of a safer asset, but more liquid asset to build up the capital stack, so that when you get to the point of having that capital, you'll be able to take what is quote unquote risky positions in something, but it'll be more informed decisions that make it less risk.
I think at the essence, what I'm really getting at is that you want to go build capital because it forces you to grow a muscle.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, look, I bought an apartment, I'm a limited partner, or I bought this thing and I get this cash flow and I didn't really learn anything. If that thing goes away, you have no skills, you have no confidence. And the ultimate financial freedom is when you have the muscle around something. So if you say, look, I think 10 million is the number. I think that you want to target 10 million. Million is like middle class anymore. Yeah. And any monkey can bump into $1 million. Just go to a job. Hell, you go to McDonald's and over 40 years, you'll end up with $1 million in your 401k. You can do it by accident. What I would suggest is that 10 million forces you to evolve into a place where you understand how to create. And if and when you lose money or get wiped out, you'll say, okay, that sucks. And I know how to go rebuild it. And it won't take you 40 years. We don't have the ability to wake up at 55, lose our money and have no skills and recreate it. We just end up destitute. So my contention is go do the thing. If you're going to risk something, go build something, build your skills. The whole point of this is make sure you're doing something that makes you confident because you've developed some type of skill around money and investing. If you don't have that, you'll never be free. I don't care how much passive income you have. You'll never have the confidence to know that you could actually create it. And you'll always be afraid of losing it.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about FrameTec.
FrameTec was, so we all know that there's this massive gap in housing. Like housing is too expensive and there's not enough of it being produced. Why are things more expensive? Why are eggs more expensive now than they were 3 months ago? People go, oh, bird flu. Well, no, it's because there's not enough eggs. So that's the problem. It's economics, it's supply and demand. Why are houses too expensive? Two things. There's not enough made. And why aren't we making enough? Government regulation accounts for 30% of the price of houses. And people are just leaving the trades. So we've got this problem. Everybody acknowledges there needs to be more housing and it needs to be more affordable. So a few years ago, I had some guys come to me that I'd known for decades, and they said, we have this idea to fix this. And I said, what's the idea? And they gave me the business plan, and it was basically to have a vertically integrated framing company that would frame houses and apartments and do it offsite. So you build all the pieces, the components, the floors, the walls, the trusses in a manufacturing plant. And then our company, FrameTec, takes the stuff over on site, puts it together. We hand it to the developer and we say, okay, run. So we've taken this thing out, and I said, okay, that's cool. So we're just replacing them. And they said, not just replacing them, we're exponentially improving the process. So here's the outcome. We're 4 times faster. We have a 10 times better quality product, and we have 99% less waste. So we're not nibbling around the edges. When you have something that is that fundamentally transformational and disrupts the entire system, you can actually solve the problem. So we can solve, there's 5 to 10 million missing units today. And we're going backwards every year, 400,000 or 500,000. Like there's 1.5 million needed, and we're building 1 million units. So this is a problem. And it's not going to be solved just because we deport people. This was a problem 5 years ago before all these people started coming in, and there were millions missing. So ultimately,
it's going to make it worse when they deport people, though.
I think that
there's
will
make it worse.
Yeah, I mean, so we've got this problem, and so we need people solving it. FrameTec is a major part of that solution. Guys like Paulo, who founded Boxable, a friend of mine. So creative people that are doing things, because this industry really hadn't changed in 70 years. 1954, the nail gun was invented. That was like the last major innovation that impacted the whole industry. So FrameTec is solving that. Everybody wins. We've heard stakeholders and ESG and all these terms over the years. And what's interesting is when I look at this holistically, everybody does win. Like all the stakeholders, the community wins with more houses, more great jobs, core manufacturing jobs. And we're doing a lot of automation. So instead of 3,000 homes produced framed a year with what would have normally taken 600 people to do, we're doing it with under 200. So we're way more efficient. Robots are doing the heavy lifting, breaking themselves as opposed to humans. Nobody's getting their fingers cut off. So we're doing all that stuff. The environment wins because we're not cutting down an extra 30% of the trees for nothing to throw away. And the investors are getting, the investors are watching the value of their investment go through the roof, because they see when you build something from scratch, kind of like an apartment, you build it from dirt, you create a ton of value. If you just build something and slap paint on it, it's not the same thing as building it from the ground up. And we're building something from the ground up that we can then put across the country. We started in Arizona, and now we're going into Texas. I mean, we just announced that we're moving into Texas. And so you'll see these things all over the country.
Awesome. And you don't know much about me, but we'd say 475 of our units are mobile home parks. So it's almost like, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's like you have built the thing that makes mobile home parks so efficient. You can build them in a factory and then bring them out. Unfortunately, you can't get zoning for mobile home parks, and then they don't sell for the same price as like a house would. So you're kind of like meeting in the middle of the road of mobile homes and single family homes. And if you have the correct construction, I would imagine it would be, you put them together correctly, right? It's just a wood frame house. That's what a mobile home is. It's just very cheaper material for mobile homes, at least.
Yeah, and all of these, like mobile homes and manufactured homes, and 3D printed homes, all these things are part of the solution. What we're doing is we're replacing a part of a traditional site-built house with a way better process for the framing piece. So people oftentimes get confused about FrameTec, and they go, oh, this is like manufactured housing. Like, no. What we're doing is we're taking the framing, which is 15%-ish of a house price, and we're taking that and doing it exponentially better. And so it's we can do custom 10,000, 20,000 square foot houses or apartments. We're building hotels right now. Anything that's framed, we just do it a lot better and a lot faster, which ultimately means it's a lot more cost effective, because if it's faster and better quality, you don't have the defects, and you save the cost of capital. If you're doing something faster, you don't have the cost of capital that you do if it takes longer. So ultimately everybody wins except the legacy thinking. And I love that. I want to see all the winners, but I don't care about the old way of thinking. If somebody's going to think, it's like, well, I want to keep my horse. I'm like, fine, that's a hobby, but the car is going to take over the horse's job. I was just watching 1923, and Harrison Ford's like, what is this crazy thing? Why can't I hitch my horse? And they're like, well, we took him out. We needed parking spaces. So legacy thinking, as much as I love Harrison Ford, I get it, but I'm happy to disrupt that so we can make society better.
Awesome. So where can people find you?
So what I did, and I created this resource. I've written a lot of books. And I realized that most people buy books and don't actually read them. And I was like, okay, well, how can I help more people create more freedom? And what I said this earlier, that I believe that there's a $10 million number, that you've got to go after 10 million, partly for the money, but mostly because it'll change you as a human. When your net worth is 10 million, it creates a different level of human and a different muscle system in your body. So I took the principles of going from 0 to multi-million back to negative 5 million, and then building these 70 plus companies over the last 30 years. And I took the principles. This was first principle thinking. And I said, okay, what were the things that the process? I boiled it down to 10 steps. So it's 10 steps to 10 million. It'll take you 10 minutes to read. And it's something that anybody can do in a period of 10 years or less. So there's a lot of 10s here. It's a theme. And what that does is it gives you clarity that you don't need to spend 40 years as a slave. If you do something, this is active. This is like, you've got to do certain things. If you just, I would say that passive is cool, but there's an extreme to it. If you say, I just want to have passive money and not have to do anything, I'm like, okay, try having passive sex with your partner. See how long the partner lasts. The partner's going to leave. They're like, you're terrible. You just lay around. So Like you got to engage in your monetary life, and so this is a path for that. If you truly want to be free, you have to have a life by design, not just by default. And most people, unfortunately, are trained to be in default mode, hand their money over to somebody, work for 40 years, and hope they have money when they're 55 or 60. Oh, by the way, to get that download, you go to turnkeyretirement.com. I was thinking about, what is this? It's really a turnkey retirement system. And retirement is where it's not about not working, it's about not having to think about money. So the idea for me is I want everybody to retire as soon as possible from working for money. That's what this is. Turnkey retirement is the process to get past the money. So make no mistake, money's involved, but it's not you being a money bee. It's literally you being a honey bee, going after the honey. Let the money be a side effect.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Millionaire Journey podcast. Please rate, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share with somebody you think would enjoy listening.